Hey there, this is Dr. Jason Shumard, owner and director of Integrative Wellness Center of San Diego, and also the author of The Thyroid Epidemic. And today I want to talk to you more about some common pitfalls when you're dealing with a thyroid condition. I speak to patients on a regular basis, and I have initial consultations with many individuals that are dealing with these thyroid conditions, and unfortunately, many of them are just super frustrated. And if you're watching this video right now, you're probably one of those individuals that is super frustrated. Most of them have been dealing with the condition for some time. They've been told specific information that doesn't really make sense to them. They don't feel good. They're doing specific medications and they don't feel better. They're constantly getting worse. Their quality of life is decreasing. They're having problems with energy. They're having problems with weight gain, digestive issues, hair loss, just overall not feeling good. And traditionally speaking, when you have a problem like this, most of us are going to have a conversation with our medical doctor, a primary care doctor. And when they get diagnosed with the hypothyroidism, for most of these individuals, they're dealing with hypothyroidism, they start taking a medication, Synthroid, levothyroxine, something like that, hoping and praying that this is going to be the answer for them to start seeing some results and start feeling better. But as I mentioned, for most individuals, they don't feel better. They continually get worse over time. And as they're having these conversations with their doctors, the doctor is basically telling them there's nothing else that's going on. And so oftentimes they may recommend antidepressants, anti-anxiety, maybe some sleep medication. Maybe they're thinking they're having sleep issues, whatever it might be. But the traditional method is additional medication, which frustrates people even more, which is why I wanted to do this video with you today. Because when I evaluate someone, especially when they're dealing with a thyroid condition, there's a lot of pitfalls that they've missed, meaning the traditional method or traditional model is not going to evaluate these individuals. And when I say these individuals that are suffering from a thyroid condition, there's likely other problems that are going on. And I want to go over the common ones that we see in our practice that you may be dealing with right now, and that's where your frustrations are really stemming from at this point. So what are some common pitfalls? So the first one we want to talk about is number one, is that oftentimes your doctor is only running TSH. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this, TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So what happens is if this marker goes up, this is considered hypothyroidism. If it goes down, it's considered hyper. So it's inversely related to the situation. But for most individuals, they're dealing with the hypo. So we'll talk about hypo today. And now if you get diagnosed with hypothyroidism because your TSH is elevated, again, as I mentioned, you're given the medication. Maybe you come back a couple months later, and at that time, your numbers are now normal, and so your doctor is telling you everything is fine, your thyroid is now functioning normally. And in many cases it's really not functioning normally. There are more things that are going on that's not being discussed. So if you're just running TSH and that's it, well, again, as I mentioned, your TSH may be normal because of the medication. Right? You're taking a medication that is making the TSH look normal on paper, but in many cases, the person doesn't feel better even though their TSH is normal. So think about this. If your TSH is normal, but you still have symptoms of thyroid condition, doesn't it make sense to start looking at other markers that are involved with the thyroid? Of course it does. So that's number two, is that looking at the other markers with thyroid. And just so you know, there are 10 markers that should be ran. And if you're interested in what those other 10 markers are, I have done other videos so you can go back and watch those either if you're on my Facebook page or on our YouTube page, you can watch those as well. So there are 10 markers that should be ran. That includes the TSH. So if your TSH is normal, maybe the other 10 markers need to be evaluated to see what is going on because when you look at these other markers, you can specifically see the steps that are deficient or not working appropriately, or what we would refer to as not functioning optimally, that need to be addressed. And there are specific things, specific protocols that can be done to restore that function to get the person feeling better. But let's just say that all these markers are fine and there's no other, we've looked at the full thyroid, there's nothing going on, and everything looks like it's in proper place at that point. So then we have to start looking at other organs and systems, right? So there's other organs that could be malfunctioning. Again, we're not talking about disease state here, we're talking about function. So when you're looking at the body, there's a disease state, and a disease state is when you're in the last stage, the late stage, when symptoms are really severe, there's multiple problems that are going on. That's when it's been going on for many, many, many years. When you've lost function, things are developing, but it's not fully a disease state. As a functional health doctor, my goal is to find the problems before they get into a disease state. So hopefully that makes sense, that we want to keep that person as healthy as possible and not wait until they get into that disease state. So there are other organs that are involved in this process that we're dealing with that may mimic thyroid-like symptoms. So for example, there could be an adrenal issue, right? The adrenal gland could be malfunctioning and it's not doing its job effectively because maybe the person is under a lot of stress, mentally, physically, or chemically, and it's been going on for many, many years. Maybe they're in a bad relationship, maybe they're in a bad job, or maybe they're living in an environment that's just not conducive to their health, and it's going to impact the adrenal gland. So what sort of symptoms are we going to see? We're going to see fatigue, we're going to see weight gain, we're going to see brain fog, potentially hair loss, things of that nature that are going to be contributory from the adrenal gland. So it may not even be a thyroid issue at all the person's experiencing. It could be something like adrenal.